I have known Rowan Caldross since we were 11 years old, when he bloodied my nose in the muddy yard behind Aldenmere Academy and then offered me his handkerchief to clean it. That was the manner of the man. He hit hard, and he was sorry afterward, but he was never quite sorry enough to stop hitting. By the time we were grown, Rowan had become the Highland Duke of Caldross, a title that carried with it one crumbling castle on the northern moors, 30,000 acres of tenant farms, a reputation for ferocity in the courts of Parliament, and a grandmother who had long since decided she would run his life whether he liked it or not. I was there for all of it. I am telling this story because no one else will tell it honestly, and because I was, as it happens, the only witness to the precise moment when the most ungovernable man I have ever known lost every argument he had ever made for his own freedom. It began, as most catastrophes in Rowan's life began, with a letter from his grandmother. Lady Iona, Dowager Duchess of Caldross, was 81 years old, 4 feet and 11 inches tall, and possessed of a will that could bend iron. She had outlasted 2 kings, 3 prime ministers, and 5 attempts by her own son, Rowan's father, God rest him, to relocate her to a smaller house. She had never been relocated. She wrote to Rowan twice a year, once at Christmas, with gifts he was instructed precisely how to use, and once in autumn with instructions for his life he was expected to follow without question. He never followed them. She wrote again anyway. The autumn letter arrived on a Tuesday. Rowan read it at breakfast, set it down on the table beside the marmalade, and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as a man sighting a storm on the horizon. "She has chosen a bride for me," he said. Again, he picked up his coffee. "A vicar's ward, an orphan, no family, no fortune, no connections. The vicar himself died in April, which leaves the girl with precisely nothing and nowhere to go." He set the cup down. "My grandmother has installed her at Caldross for the winter." I said nothing because there was nothing useful to say. Lady Iona had installed the girl at Caldross. The matter was, to that extent, already arranged. "I am not going to Caldross," Rowan said. He was at Caldross by Friday. I went with him because I always went with him, and because I will admit I was curious. Lady Iona had chosen women for Rowan before: a colonel's daughter, a baronet's niece, a twice-widowed countess who had terrified even me. Each time Rowan had been polite, correct, and unmovable. Each time Lady Iona had retreated and regrouped. The fact that she was now deploying a penniless vicar's orphan suggested either that she had run out of better options, or that she had, at last, developed a strategy I did not understand. We arrived in the early evening, when the moors had gone the color of pewter under a low sky, and the first real cold of autumn had settled into the stones of Caldross. The castle was a blunt northern thing. No ornament, no apology, just 400 years of endurance, and the fires were already lit in every room, which meant Lady Iona had been expecting us precisely when we arrived. She met us in the entrance hall. She was wearing black, as she always wore black, and she was leaning on a cane that she did not need, a habit she had developed sometime around her 75th year and had never relinquished because it gave her something formidable to gesture with. "You are late," she said to Rowan. "We made excellent time," he said. "You were supposed to arrive this morning." She looked at him with the expression she had perfected over a lifetime, complete and total certainty that she was right. "Miss Aldrin is already at dinner. Do not make her wait." I watched Rowan's jaw tighten. "Grandmother, I have told you I have no intention of." "Of course you haven't. You never intend anything useful." She turned and walked toward the dining room at a pace that suggested the cane was entirely decorative. "Come." We came. The dining room at Caldross was long and low-ceilinged, and lit by 2 fires and a chandelier whose candles Lady Iona insisted on having relit every evening at exactly 5:30. The table had been set for 4. At the far end, rising as we entered, was a young woman I had never seen before. I will tell you what I saw, because Rowan would never describe it, and I am the one telling this story. She was not what I had expected. She was not beautiful in the fashion that society calls beautiful. She had no extraordinary arrangement of features, no striking coloring, nothing that would have made a room turn. She was slender and pale, with brown hair that had been put up with more neatness than artistry, and a gown that was clean and well kept, and several years behind the fashion. She had the look of a woman who had learned to make very little go a long way without complaint. Her eyes, when she raised them to us, were gray and direct and entirely without fear. She curtsied to Rowan. He inclined his head. "Miss Aldrin," Lady Iona said with satisfaction, "this is my grandson, the Duke of Caldross. Rowan, this is Miss Marin Aldrin, who has been kind enough to keep me company these past 3 weeks." "Your Grace," Miss Aldrin said, her voice was quiet and clear, "I hope your journey was not too cold." "It was fine," Rowan said, in the tone he used when he was being correct. We sat. Lady Iona looked upon her arrangements with contentment. Rowan reached for his wine. Dinner was not, as I had feared, a performance. Lady Iona made no effort to engineer conversation between them. She talked, as she always talked, about the estate, about the tenant farms, about the political situation in Parliament, and the iniquities of the recent harvest assessment. Miss Aldrin listened without fidgeting. When she was addressed directly, she answered directly, without embellishment and without the particular kind of anxious charm that I had seen from other candidates. The smile held too long, the careful agreement with every opinion the Duke expressed. She disagreed with Lady Iona once, on a question of the drainage on the lower fields, and she did it without apology. "The eastern culvert was cleared in September," she said, "but the western one has not been touched since at least before Mr. Hearn retired, which by his own account was 11 years ago. The field closest to the stream has been wet since August." Lady Iona looked at her. "How do you know this?" "I walked the lower fields on Thursday," she said. "I thought it might be useful to understand the layout of the estate." There was a short silence. Rowan, who had been attending to his plate, looked up. "You walked the lower fields," he said. "Yes." "In what weather?" She considered this question with the gravity it apparently deserved. It was raining a little, but not unreasonably. Rowan looked at his grandmother. His grandmother looked at the middle distance with the expression of a woman who has placed a very good bet and is waiting for the result. That night, I found him in the library at midnight with a glass of whiskey, and the Caldross estate accounts open on the desk before him. "She's right about the western culvert," he said without looking up. "The steward's notes from last spring mentioned standing water on the west field. Nobody acted on it." "She walked the fields," I said, "to be useful." He did not answer that. He turned a page of the accounts. I sat across from him and said nothing, and after a while I went to bed, and I think he stayed with the accounts until considerably later. The following morning, he went to look at the culvert himself. I know this because I saw him go, booted and coated, striding out across the north yard at 8:30 in the air that smelled of cold heather and coming rain. I know also that Miss Aldrin was already at the edge of the lower field, because I saw her too. She had a notebook, and she was writing in it when he appeared, and she did not look startled. I watched from the library window. I could not hear them. What I saw was this: 2 figures standing in a gray field, the Duke tall and deliberate, the young woman with her notebook open, gesturing once toward the stream, then once toward the far tree line. He looked where she pointed. He said something. She said something back. He did not look like a man being polite. He looked like a man paying attention. They walked the full length of the western field together. It took 45 minutes. When they came back side by side, not quite at the same pace, and she was still writing in her notebook. At breakfast, he told Lady Iona that he intended to have the western culvert cleared before the first frost. Lady Iona received this information without surprise. "Miss Aldrin suggested as much last week," she said. "I had not yet found the time to tell you." Rowan looked at Miss Aldrin. Miss Aldrin was eating her toast and appeared to be making no particular claim on the moment. "Why did you not tell me yourself?" he asked her. She looked up. "It did not seem my place," she said, "to make recommendations about an estate that is not mine." "But you walked the fields anyway." "I walked the fields," she agreed, "because it is my nature to want to understand where I am." He held her gaze for a moment. She held his without effort and without calculation. Then he returned to his breakfast, and Lady Iona received my eye across the table and gave me the smallest possible nod, which I interpreted correctly as, "You see." The days settled into a pattern I had not anticipated. Rowan, who had come to Caldross intending to be polite, correct, and gone within a week, did not leave. He did not, to my observation, make any decision to stay. He simply found that each morning there was something at Caldross worth attending to, and each morning Miss Aldrin had already begun attending to it. She was not pursuing him. That was the thing I could not stop noticing. She spoke with him when they were in the same room and not when they were not. She made no arrangement to be where he was. She did not dress for dinner with any particular attention beyond neatness, and she did not watch him when he was not looking at her. She was not, as far as I could determine, performing anything at all. She simply went about the business of the days, reading in the library, helping Lady Iona with the estate correspondence, walking the grounds in weather that would have kept most sensible people indoors. And if the Duke happened to be in the library, or happened to ask her about the correspondence, or happened to fall into step beside her on the grounds, she received his company with a plainness that was, by any measure I could apply, the most disarming thing I had seen in 30 years of watching women attempt to disarm Rowan Caldross. He lent her a book on northern drainage systems. She read it and returned it with a folded note inside that listed 3 questions and 2 corrections. He read the note at dinner and looked at her. "You found errors in Harrington. 2 instances where his measurements don't align with the diagrams," she said. "It may be a printing discrepancy, I am not certain." "Where?" She told him. He went back to the library after dinner and did not return. The next morning he confirmed she was right. He told me this over breakfast, not her, because she was not at breakfast yet. She rose early and had usually already walked before the household was fully awake, a habit I attributed to years of managing her own time in a vicar's house with no one to defer to. He told me the way a man tells someone a fact he cannot quite account for, flatly, without ornament. "She found 2 errors in Harrington," he said. "Yes," I said. "Harrington is considered definitive." "Yes," I said. He drank his coffee. "She has had no formal education," he said. "The vicar taught her. Apparently the vicar was thorough." "Apparently." He set the cup down. "Edwin," he said, which was the name he used when he was being more honest than usual. "My grandmother chose her because she has nothing. No money, no family, no position, nothing to offer me but herself." "That would appear to be the point," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "I am the Highland Duke of Caldross," he said. "I have 30,000 acres and 3 seats in Parliament and my grandfather's reputation for refusing every compromise that has ever been put before him. What does it say about me if I—" He stopped. "If you choose a woman with nothing," I said. He did not answer. "It says," I said carefully, "that you are your grandmother's grandson, which is probably what she has been trying to tell you." He left the room without answering. I counted this privately as progress. The fortnight wore on, and the moors went from pewter to iron, and the first hard frost came down on a Thursday night and silvered every field from the stone walls to the stream. I found Rowan that morning standing at the window of the north corridor, looking out at the white fields, and I found Miss Aldrin at the other end of the same corridor, doing precisely the same thing. Neither of them had noticed the other. I stopped in the doorway and did not announce myself. What I saw was not dramatic. She simply looked at the frost on the heather with an expression of quiet wonder, as though the world had given her something she had not expected, and she intended to appreciate it honestly. He watched her looking, and whatever calculation or resistance had been running in him, I saw it change. He crossed the corridor. She turned at the sound of his footstep and did not startle. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning." He stood beside her at the window. They both looked at the frost. "You were right about the culvert," he said. "The west field is dry." "I am glad," she paused. "I hope the timing was sufficient." He looked at her, not at the field. "Miss Aldrin, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer me without managing my feelings about it." She looked at him with those direct gray eyes. "I will try." "My grandmother brought you here," he said. "Did she give you instructions?" Miss Aldrin was quiet for a moment. "She told me," she said at last, "that you were a man who had never in his life been spoken to honestly, because everyone who spoke to you either wanted something from you or was afraid of you. She told me that she was too old to be afraid of you and too old to want anything more than to see you happy before she died. She told me to simply be myself and not to manage you." She paused. She did not mention that being oneself might result in 2 weeks of walking through frost at 7 in the morning. I heard Rowan make a sound that was not quite a laugh and was not quite not one. "And if I told you," he said, "that I have found the last 2 weeks considerably more useful than any 2 weeks I can remember in recent years, would you take that as a compliment?" "I would take it," she said seriously, as a fair description of what we accomplished with the western drainage. I am not sure it was intended as a personal remark. This time he did laugh. It was a low, brief sound, unused. A laugh that had been kept somewhere unreachable for a long time and had been startled out by something it had not been prepared to meet. She looked at him as he laughed, and there was something in her face that she did not attempt to conceal. A warmth, quick and honest, gone as soon as it arrived. "Miss Aldrin," he said, when he had finished laughing, "I am going to tell you something, and I would like you to receive it plainly." "I generally receive things plainly," she said. "I know that. That is why I am telling you." He turned from the window to face her fully, and he had the manner he used in Parliament when he had made a decision and was done with all argument against it. Deliberate, settled, without room for misunderstanding. "I came to Caldross prepared to dislike this arrangement. I came prepared to be polite and unmoved and gone before any particular damage was done. I did not account for the possibility that my grandmother had, for once in her long and undefeated life, made a choice I could not improve on." He paused. "I am not a man who speaks in circles. What I am telling you is that I would like to know you better, considerably better, and I am asking whether that is a thing you would welcome." She looked at him for a long moment. The frost was bright on the fields beyond the window, and the light was the kind of northern morning light that makes everything look very clear and very old. "Yes," she said, "it is a thing I would welcome." He held out his hand. She looked at it, then placed hers in it, a simple gesture, a hand offered and taken, warm despite the cold of the corridor, and that was how it began. I found Lady Iona at breakfast, sitting with her tea with the particular composure of a woman who has been right about everything and is not surprised. "Well," she said. "They are walking the north corridor together," I said. "They appear to be discussing the frost." She nodded slowly. "He looked at the fields," she said. "He looked at the fields and then he looked at her. I saw it from the courtyard." She set her cup down with precision. "I have looked for that for 30 years, a woman who makes him look at the world differently simply by being in it." She was quiet a moment. "She has nothing, Edwin, not a penny, not a name. When his father was alive, the notion would have been absurd." "His father is not alive," I said. "Rowan is." "Yes," she said. "He is." And she did not say anything more, but she sat a little straighter, and her tea went cold in her cup, and she did not appear to notice. The engagement was announced 6 weeks later, at Christmas, in the great hall of Caldross before a fire that Lady Iona had insisted upon, and a gathering of tenants and household that Rowan had extended because, as he said simply, the people of Caldross ought to know who their next duchess would be. Miss Aldrin, Marin, stood beside him, her hand in his, in a gown that Lady Iona had provided, and that was the finest thing she had ever worn. She did not look overwhelmed by it. She looked, if anything, as she always looked, direct and attentive and entirely present. A visiting cousin of the family made some remark, later in the evening, about the peculiarity of the match. He made it under his breath and to a second cousin, and he did not intend Rowan to hear it. Rowan heard it. He crossed the room without haste, and he looked at the cousin with the expression that had made him the most formidable man in 3 counties for 20 years. "You were saying," he said. The cousin was not, after that, saying anything. Rowan returned to Marin's side without comment. She looked at him with the calm gray eyes that missed nothing. "What did you say to him?" she asked. "Nothing worth repeating." He looked as though he had been told something quite definite. "He was," Rowan said. "Definitively." And then, quietly, with no audience required, no crowd called to witness it, no society assembled to receive proof of what he had chosen, he lifted her hand and held it in both of his, and the firelight made everything in that room warm and ordinary and entirely right. That is the story of how Rowan Caldross, the Highland Duke of iron temper and inflexible will, was outmaneuvered by an 81-year-old woman with a cane she did not need, and a vicar's orphan who walked flooded fields in the rain because it was her nature to understand where she was. I was best man at the wedding. Lady Iona sat in the front row, straight as a sword in her black dress, and when the vicar pronounced them married and Rowan turned to his bride with an expression I had never in 30 years seen on his face, open and certain, and for the first time in all the years I had known him, entirely undefended, Lady Iona permitted herself exactly one small, private smile. She had been right, she always had been. She had simply been waiting for him to see it.